What's going on, everyone? How are you? My name is Gordy Bonker. I'm the host and founder of Bonkers Cards. Today, I'm in Robert Edward Auctions headquarters with Mr. President Brian Dwyer himself. Today, we're going to be going over the spring catalog auction that just concluded for REA. Some incredible results, some records we're going to get to speak about. And Brian, thanks so much for having me and getting to be in studio with you.
Yeah, good to have you here. We got a lot to cover.
I know. It was a busy auction for you. I'd love to hear at a high level just some of the records we were talking about maybe before we started shooting here, some big numbers that came out of this auction.
Yeah, so total sales is a number that everybody's always focused on, right?
Yeah.
So this auction did more than $15.4 million in sales.
Wow.
Great night for us, great night for our consigners. Bidders got a lot of great items, and a big night for the hobby. There were a lot of records rewritten on the individual item level. We took in more than 91,000 bids. We had a record number of bidders, second most number of winners in REA auction history. So a lot to be happy about here as we kind of look back on this most recent auction.
Those two stats jump out to me. The most number of bidders, so these are unique collectors that are tuning in, putting bids in, and then the number of bids, 91,000 bids placed. I guess there's a lot of different trends we're seeing in the hobby. That's a great indication of there are more people coming into the hobby. There are more collectors joining. Speak to that a little bit, because I think that's a really important metric.
Yeah, it's something that I bring up frequently. The hobby is in a great place, right? It's easy to sometimes look back on 2020 and 2021 and say, oh, we're down from that. But really, where we sit, we're seeing hundreds of new people join our auctions every auction. We have the 3 big catalog auctions. We have the monthly encore auctions. Every auction is drawing in hundreds of new bidders. And the hobby is in a great spot. People are very passionate about what they collect. The prices realized speak to that. No matter what segment of this auction we look at, there were real bright spots. And so, to your point, the hobby's growing, people are excited, people are willing to spend money, and records are being set, and it's all positive.
Yeah, no, I think that's a major takeaway when you look at the results of an auction like this. And your point being, prices will move up and down in this. Historically, it's a market, right? Their prices fluctuate. But to see more and more collectors entering the hobby, I think it's kind of consistent. You'll see with card grading, set building, card submissions. I was just listening to a stat that PSA had a record number of cards graded last month, which means there are more cards being sent in. There's more collectors in the overall ecosystem. And obviously those numbers are a testament to REA and the growth that you guys are seeing, but it's also a testament to the hobby. So I think that's excellent. So another major theme that I wanted to talk to you about that we noticed was game-worn memorabilia. That's kind of one of the staples. When I looked at this auction, when we had our conversation a few weeks ago on my channel, there are some really unique items that came from this that were game-worn. The big one, His Airness Michael Jordan, you saw the game-used rookie season sneakers sell for a fantastic result. Talk to me about the game-used memorabilia and some of that Jordan stuff specifically.
Yeah, so on the Jordan shoes, 1984 airships, they predate his signature Jordan shoe. They got a lot of coverage, they got a lot of excitement, they had a lot of different bids, and ultimately they turned in a great number. We had other items that weren't 6-figure pieces that generated a lot of bids. Eddie Matthews bat, one of the most bid on items in the auction, going for I think over $13,000. Jim Tomei uniform over $10,000. Mike Trout nearly $10,000. Al Kaline $21,000. Fresh to the hobby also, like the airship sneakers, first time ever being sold. And I think what we're seeing is that collectors more and more are realizing that game used is still a value. When we look at what some of these player cards sell for, an Al Kaline rookie in a 9 is more expensive than a jersey that he wore in the 1968 championship season. And when you put it in that kind of perspective and those terms, collectors are gravitating. And so we've seen a lot of collectors come from the card side of the market and go into game worn and game used. And we've seen things like photo matching just totally change the dynamic of the game-used memorabilia market. And that's exciting. There are more and more information's out there, higher levels of technology are out there. We've seen it on the card side in certain areas. Now it's in the memorabilia side. And so it's fun to watch these parts of the market that have been around forever, right? Game-used memorabilia has been around forever, but they're really starting to come into their own. And we're excited here at REA to get to showcase some of these items and in the future see what big numbers they continue to turn in.
Right. It's interesting because it is not a new category. Like you said, it's been around forever, but it is now starting to mature, similarly to some of the card categories that we've seen. Yes, an alkaline rookie in a high grade will go for much more than game used currently, but who's to say where game used memorabilia will go when you look at the scarcity of those items, especially when they're attached to memorable or important dates in history of the sport. So I think that's going to be fun to watch. And you mentioned photography. That's a category over the last few years that has caught the eye of a lot of collectors. And I think that's another one where Type 1 photography has been around for a long time. But now that it's starting to get attached to specific important moments in history of these athletes or historical figures, there is a maturing happening in terms of the valuation of that category. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the Joe Jackson, the shoeless Joe Jackson Type 1 photograph. Remarkable piece of history, extremely scarce, which I think will drive the price in that. But talk to me about the result of the Joe Jackson photograph, but then also more broadly of what you see of the original photography category.
Yeah, so the Joe Jackson photo at $192,000 is just a very strong, impressive result. We do some work with Alton Insights, who tracks the market, and they actually pointed out in one of their most recent articles that Jackson photo has been offered publicly 5 times, and each time it's continued to rise in value. And it sold nearly 50% more than it sold at auction last year. And so I think that tells you how many people are coming into that part of the market, how much confidence there is in that part of the market. And again, when you compare it to cards, where a lot of people get their start, right? Nobody grows up on the playground collecting game-used jerseys or original photography. But when you look at what has happened to the pricing of cards and you go to other segments of the market, you realize that there's value there. Moments is a word that you've used several times in the last couple minutes, and I think that that's important. Collectors are always about the connection to the items. And so when you can take a game used memorabilia piece and tie it to a moment, tie it to a season, tie it to a championship, when you look at an image and say what this captures. And with that Joe Jackson image, I mean, it's captured by Charles Conlon, the Babe Ruth of photographers. It's early, 1913. We know what happened to Jackson just 6 years later. Those are connections that are really valuable to collectors. And I think that's what we've seen with photography. If you can tie it to a key player at a key point in history, if you can tie it to his rookie card, we've seen card images just explode at auction. Over $800,000 for a 51 Bowman Mantle rookie image. That's what I think are the brightest spots of these markets. And then there's tremendous value, right? There's some Hall of Fame photographs that you can get for hundreds of dollars.
Right.
So it's an interesting thing, and I've described it pretty frequently as being in the early stage, right? This maybe is only the 3rd or 4th inning of the game of original photography. So it's fun, and I'm keeping an eye on it.
Yeah, I would certainly as well. I mean, I would love to just kind of go into the different stages of photography, right? Most of what we're speaking about is Type 1 photography, right? I believe there's 4 total types, and 1 being the original print, right?
Yeah, so Type 1 photography is an image that was made off the negative within 18 to 24 months of that original negative.
Gotcha.
And so, yes, the most desirable type of image that you would have is a Type 1 image. That being said, there are images that no Type 1s are known to exist. And we've seen strong prices of Type 2s or 3s or 4s. We had a Type 4 image of Joe Jackson and Ty Cobb in this auction that nobody's ever seen a Type 1 of. And I spoke to a collector, and he said a Type 1 might be $1 million photo in his mind. And so you can get a Type 4 for $1,000, $1,500 that, again, captures these great, iconic players in hugely important moments in time. But if a Type 1 exists, that's going to be the most valuable.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a shift, and this has probably always existed in your career. But for me, I'm noticing those extremely scarce, you mentioned it on my show, buy it when you see it type of item. That shoeless Joe Jackson photograph we're talking about, what's the total population that exists of that?
If it's 2 or 3, I'd be surprised.
Right. Yeah. So, there was an item also in this auction, a buy it when you see it type card, the only known example of the Ty Cobb broadleaf back.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about that and not only that unique card and you finding that and bringing that to the auction, but buy it when you see it cards and items. I think that's super interesting.
Yeah, so I mean, the Ty Cobb with the broadleaf 350 back is a great one to talk about because in and of itself, a T206 Ty Cobb is not a rare card, right? Any given auction, whether it's ours or somebody else or on eBay, you can always find dozens of them available in the marketplace at any given time. But when you go and you say, okay, this is this very specific advertising back, and nobody in over 114 years has ever seen it before, that's when every collector stops and says, throw out any comp that you ever have and buy it when you see it. And we saw that, right? $270,000 for a 2.5 with a broadleaf 350 back. And the same card with a Piedmont or a Sweet Caporal back is, a couple $1,000s, right? So we've seen that, whether it's when we sell a T206 Wagner, when we sell a Baltimore News Ruth, people understand the scarcity, the importance, and the opportunity may not always exist for them. And even in the modern realm, we saw it in this auction with the Derek Jeter card. This Derek Jeter 93 SP PSA 10 hadn't been sold publicly in 15 or 16 months. And the last comp was 204,000, and we get $312,000. And that is just a function of people understanding the scarcity. There's only 21 PSA 10s and saying, I've got to capitalize on it when given the chance.
Sure, yeah. No, that Jeter card, it's a very sensitive, the way that the card was printed, the material it was used, like you said, you got to be able to jump on it. When we were talking about the Cobb, there's a number of different things I think about for collectors who are buying that specific card, right? It's the once in a lifetime, this is the only back, and that appeals to collectors that are into it for the scarcity, the lower population cards, but there's also the set collector. There's the person that wants every single Ty Cobb back. And the set collector, to me, it's the backbone of the hobby. I'm a set collector. I love to collect 1954 tops. I talk about it all the time. Set collecting is as old as the hills when it comes to this. And there was a number of huge sets that went off in this auction, and they were across different sports. You had one of the highest graded basketball sets, a number of different top sets from the 50s. Talk to me about the sets and the set collector, because I think that's a super hierarchical theme that happened in this auction.
Yeah, so I agree with you. I mean, set collecting is where we all start, right? I started building sets when I was a kid. I continued it into my teenage and adult years as a collector with a little bit of money to spend. And we've seen it never really go out of style. We've seen it change a lot, though. And I think that's what's interesting. Grading when I started submitting to PSA in 1998 was $4.50 a card. And those days are gone, right? So we've seen the appetite for submitting your own cards and grading these commons change. But when you can give somebody kind of a ready-made set and say, hey, this is number 4 on the registry, like in the case of the basketball, 69 basketball set, or this is number 1 on the registry, gives them a foundation to then build off of. And that's why you see these big numbers, $336,000 for a PSA graded set of 1969 Topps basketball. We had modern sets. We had 78 football do a big number, 85 Topps baseball do a big number. These are big sets, 792 cards, 528 cards. So, those were some huge numbers that I think cement that set collecting is not going anywhere. It's changing. Registries are becoming more important. Grading fees are higher, so people want kind of that ready-made collection, if you will. But I mean, sets in this auction were among the biggest sellers.
Yeah, I think that's a really awesome theme that exists in the hobby, or just an overall activity that happens. PSA does a great job of being able to track your set and literally compete with other collectors to get the highest graded. And as long as there's a competition to have the highest graded set, I think that's always going to continue to be a trend overall. That's no shocker to me. But in terms of shockers or surprises, I would love to know, looking at the results of this auction, what was the biggest result that surprised you?
With over 3,700 items in the auction, there were a bunch of things that caught my attention, right? And the fun thing is that we see all the bids come in live, and there were items that doubled, tripled, quadrupled on the final day. One that I kept seeing get bids that I think surprised me for sure, and a lot of other people here, was we had a 48 Bowman basketball wrapper. And it doesn't on its face seem like a big item, but we started it at $100. And it went for over $4,000. And it was among the most bid on items in the auction. And it was something that we had not seen before. And we didn't know what it was worth. So we started it low. And it's like the perfect encapsulation of the auction process, right? You put an item out, you expose it to a wide variety of bidders, and you let them tell you what it's worth.
Right.
And so we saw the auction process work there. That was a really fun one. There were sets and singles that surprised me as well. But that, I don't know, that's one that I took in from a consignor who also had no expectations, and it was fun to see it deliver.
Oh man, I definitely envy your role in uncovering a lot of these consignments from collectors and seeing these really unique individual pieces. You know, I've spoke about it. That uncut sheet of Wilson Franks, for example, really rare item. I love you just reading it and going through it. You overseeing these results. How long do you, I guess, go through the data and really digest all of the results from an auction like this?
We're always looking at it. I mean, there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to take in. On a company level, the participation, the health of the auction is important to us. On an industry level, the pricing trends and all that are important for us to have conversations with. But you know, we're building the next auctions, right? So we just ended one on Sunday. We've got another one coming up in a couple weeks. And we look at all the numbers, but we can't dwell on them because we've got auctions to build.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about some upcoming items that you have for future auctions. Is there any sneak peeks you can give us?
You know, there's so much stuff, and it's flying in on a daily basis. We just got a collection that I'm really excited about. Complete PSA registry sets going back to set building.
There you go.
From 1950 Bowman through about 1967 tops, maybe.
Wow.
We're going to be breaking those down in our Encore auctions starting this May. High grades, PSA 7s, 8s, 9s. So I'm excited about that. And then in this auction, we had a 51 Bowman Mantle signed card that actually was the highlight of a huge signed card collection that we're putting the balance of it in the summer auction. So there'll be signed T206s, signed Gaudis, signed top sets from the 50s. Really excited to share more about that.
That's exciting. As somebody, I've been really following the signed vintage market over the last year. I'm giddy to see some of those results. And that's going to be in the summer catalog auction.
It'll be in the summer catalog auction, launching around the time of the National in the latter part of July.
Awesome. Well, I know you guys always have a great presence at the National. That's going to sneak up on us. It's going to be here before you know it.
For sure.
So definitely want to check out the REA table at the National if you're going out to Cleveland. And, you know, the catalog, I've spoken a lot about the catalog to my audience, my followers. It's a perfect coffee table book. Like, I love just reading through it. So if there's any plug or anything you can add into how to get this catalog for the summer auction, I think that would be a great plug as well for everyone watching.
Yeah, so we're happy to send them out to free because we know that they're educational, they're a good resource. Anybody that wants one can go to our website, robertedwardauctions.com, request one. We'll send you one out. We can send you one for this most recent auction. We can send you one for a future auction. No shortage of catalogs to go around.
Perfect. Well, I think that's a great place to stop this. Brian, thank you so much for having me and the REA team here. Congratulations on another fantastic auction. Spring catalog auction wrapped up, and there's more auctions coming this year. We've got the Encore auction starting, as he mentioned, and then the summer catalog auction is going to be here before you guys know it. So again, my name is Gordy Bonker. I'm from Bonkers Cards. Appreciate everyone for watching. Be sure to follow Robert Edward Auctions, and we'll see you next time.